President Trump took on a different role at the coronavirus task force press briefing today. And that's a good thing because a lot of people are suggesting that President Trump stop talking about data, science, medicine, and possible cures to COVID-19. I suggested as much over the weekend on my Facebook page. Even his staunchest supporters eventually came around to agreeing that the president is not helping with his far-fetched, unfounded suggestions or questions. In fact, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican and head of the National Governors Association, said yesterday the state has gotten hundreds of calls from people asking if it's okay to take disinfectants.
We had hundreds of calls in our hotline here in Maryland about people asking about injecting or ingesting these disinfectants, which is hard to imagine that people thought that was serious, but people actually were thinking about this. Was this something you could do to protect yourself?
Mr. President, let the people who know talk about treatments and possible cures. And it looks like he's listening. Today he focused on discussing new guidelines for more testing. And it could mean somebody in the White House, as my grandma used to say, is finally talking some sense to the president. That's a Q&A for tonight. Send us your thoughts and questions. I'm Bruce Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night. And by all means, be safe.